though we say rarely encountered, we also say just this moment. Being just this moment is always available to each of us. It's always available just as we are in the midst of our life as is. And yet, we sit sesshin because despite always being this very life, we sometimes do things in life habits, that are not so skillful to nurture and support us being who we are, and which instead blind us to who we are, who those we encounter are. And we do these things not out of maliciousness, but as a result of all sorts of cause and effect, which it's not important to enumerate or articulate, except as and when it's happening, it's important to notice what is happening. If I say it, what habits are doing us, what is doing us to blind us from our own very life. So sitting, because we're just sitting, we're, I might say, not so caught up in doing those habits. Or, another way to say it is, we get to notice doing those habits, whether in the midst of being non-thinking, we discover ourselves believing and entangling the thoughts that arise and pass as this life that we are. And thoughts is a big category. There's many forms, gradations, shadings of it for us. It's always this life, this particular form, habit, thoughts. So Dogen says, think, not thinking. That doesn't quite make sense, so he clarifies non-thinking, as if that easily makes more sense to us. It does, and yet it's something that only, quote, makes sense, close quote, when it's so for us, when we can. Otherwise, we don't see the non-defiling, that holding, believing, acting thoughts seems so natural and unfortunately leads to such trouble. Troubles for us, troubles for others. As I've talked about before, and I'm sure some of you have read, Joko clarifies this in the 2 guidelines for sitting, for practicing, of noticing thought, being experiencing. Not noticing thought in order to keep track of or much less separate good thought, bad thought, accurate thought, inaccurate thought, thought because of, thought therefore of. It's simply noticing the thought, rising thought feeling, if I say it that way, and embodying the experiencing, which is always embodied, otherwise it's not experiencing. And yet, despite that it's experiencing, if I say it, it's our body-mind experiencing, we unfortunately sometimes cut ourselves off, distracted ourselves from it, whether in emotion, thought that we're chattering to ourselves or playing out. Not doing this as a matter of keeping track or keeping score, but doing this right now, right now, right now, since it is doing us. There is no us doing experiencing. Experiencing is us, is you. And that's one of the things that we clarify, if I say it that way, that we simplify and taste in our sitting. Simplify, taste, manifest in our sesshin, and can also simplify, manifest throughout our life, though we often find we have to do things that seem a little different, a little special in our life, until this becomes clear to us in our daily life, how, what is called for, how this is so. But this is so in all our life. If I say it in an artificial way, it's only experiencing. Anything that isn't experiencing isn't where you are. And yet, there's experiencing and missing the very experiencing that we can't miss. Experiencing is part and parcel of breathing, heart pumping blood, nerves working, brain functioning, I should say senses functioning. If your senses aren't functioning, you're asleep and maybe dead or unconscious. But as far as I know, most of the time, most of us are not in that state. We don't have to figure out what will be in that state. It's not experiencing in a special way or experiencing as something added on to doing, chopping up vegetables, eating, listening on the phone, doing a computer programming or whatever the work that you do is, playing music. Of course, this is whole being functioning. It's not a thing that so-called you somewhere back, wherever so-called you is doing, keeping track of so-called the rest of you experiencing. It's this whole functioning, if we call it body-mind, we can call it that. But again, still we've set up this dichotomy and we sometimes unfortunately start believing that. In Sesshin, this is easy, or I'll say easier, sometimes it's harder, because the form, sitting, walking, working, resting, nurtures and reminds us of this. In a sense, it pars away, removes the seeming distractions. Of course, they're not distractions. Hearing doesn't make a difference if it's sitting hearing in the Zendo or sitting hearing while you're driving your car down the freeway, or I don't know what they call it. They don't call it freeways here in Illinois or the Midwest. Down the highway. California, they call it freeways to distinguish between that and so-called toll roads. But I think that's a long gone distinction. It's different than sitting when you're driving down the highway. And as far as I know, the experiencing of driving a car is just that, whether it's a car that requires you to use the brakes and the accelerator and steer, or whether it's one of those that steer themselves and takes over the acceleration and braking for you when you're on the highway. At first it seems almost magical, but then if we lose track of the being present with that and instead distract ourselves from what we're doing, whether with playing with some electronic device, listening to something, not being here, then in a sense, that's caught in self-centered dream. That's holding to the self-centered thoughts, feelings, which are not a problem, except if we hold on to them in a way that it blinds us to where and what we are doing, we miss what gives nurturance and sustenance to our life, what enables us to function in a way that does not cause harm, suffering, or causes, so to speak, less harm, suffering in our world for all those that we encounter, whether we know him or not. So, non-thinking is being non-thinking. And of course, Dogen talks about it, particularly in terms of sitting upright, being still, which in a sense, requires us to be upright still, and yet allows us to not do the habits that we often do that, quote, distract us, entangle us, blind us with stories that lead us to miss who and what we are. Though Dogen says when his awakening, he speaks of body, mind dropped away, and it's dropped away, body, mind. You can say dropped away, body, mind, speaking right here. That's, Dogen says, that's being a bell hanging in the wind from whichever direction it comes, sounding, or let us say, experiencing, manifesting just that. Experiencing, manifesting, responding just that. The bell hanging has no voice of its own that it's holding on to. It's just a part of this process of the winds of the universe that are our life. And yet, there are things we are doing. There are precepts where we're making choices of what is skillful, what is not skillful, what has consequences troubling for others, consequences troubling for ourselves, and what enables us to, in a sense, open and release those habits which get us and others in trouble. So, in a way, sesshin is easy to do that. Well, no, let me not say easy, otherwise someone's going to come and tell me, well, you said sesshins are easy, and I did a sesshin and it wasn't easy. Easier, despite the fact that it might seem difficult. But it's up to us to find ways to do this in our daily life, which varies according to each of us, so that our life can nurture being who we are, can nurture, if I say it, hearing when hearing, seeing when seeing, cognizing when cognizing, sensing when sensing, which is what the Buddha says. If we don't add on the because of, thereby, therein, it should be, shouldn't be, so forth. If we don't add on or don't entangle in those when those come up, that's the end of dukkha, the end of suffering, harming, dissatisfactions in life. Then right there is our life. Non-defiling of the life of the universe. Or when we hold to those self-centeredness, we defile what can't be defiled, which is the life of the universe, of our life, and those we encounter. Can't be defiled, and yet somehow we make trouble. So, in a sense, that's our task once we leave sesshin, once we end our formal sesshin, to make the rest of our life sesshin a little more skillful with the wisdom we've gained and the insights that we have. Yes, it's just noticing thought, experiencing body. And we only make those two, not that body and thought are separate, but because we're so used to, if I say it, prioritizing thoughts, emotions, I want, I don't want, he shouldn't, he should have, reacting out of those. It's not this, it should be that. She says she has that, I don't have that. How come? Whereby? All the ways that habits of mind that come out of nowhere. We don't know where they come from. We don't have to go figure it out. That isn't the practice of going to figure out where it comes from. Our practice is to notice when it shows up. And to notice all the more. Not only did it show up, but I've grabbed onto it. And I take it to, who am I going to beat with it? You, me, myself, others, someone I don't even know out there? Then we see what we've grabbed onto and used as a basis. Because I like or don't like, or they should and shouldn't, we make trouble. So that's the part of noticing thought that Joko especially wants us to attend to. Not to sense a thought, not because there's a problem with thoughts, but because we like to make problems with it. And we make problems with bodily sensations, with all the forms of experiencing. We even make problems with, I'm experiencing. You're not. Oh. So, how sesshin continues in our life depends on us. Not that you need to then, we need to then get rid of things so I can sit 6 hours in my day. Not, you could sit as many hours as works, as many minutes as work, as many seconds as works. And it's also a matter how to, in the activities of our life, with the people we live with. They're not ever the problem. The problem is how do we see and manifest them as what they are. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who join life with us to support us and to give us the opportunity to support them. So if we are Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva doing deep prajna paramita, clearly seeing the emptiness of all the 5 conditions, in other words, the 5 conditions of being human, then we can relieve suffering and harm for everyone we encounter. Not as something to keep score or to judge, but be that opportunity to experience the emptiness of form, of seeing, just seeing. Emptiness doesn't mean you don't see, doesn't mean you don't hear, doesn't mean you don't sing and dance. In fact, that's, in the Song of Zazen, that's the next lines after Hakuin says to see that self-nature is no nature. Then we've gone beyond just words. Then we are the song and dance of the Dharma. Or we're the washing dishes of the Dharma and the typing in email response. Or, and you fill in the yours. There isn't a single, well, no, that's not good. Almost every task we have in life can be done in this way. If we even make the effort a little bit from time to time, every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, or whenever we set our timer on whatever electronic device we use, and when it buzzes, take a moment to make whatever practice effort is appropriate then. Then continue on in that with the rest, whatever the activity you're doing, if that would not disturb you or disturb others. Then, hey, this very life is the body of the Buddha. This very place is the lotus land of purity. This very place, wherever you are. But it's up to you to make this very place into the nurturing support for you to manifest the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in all realms in your very life, in your very actions, in your very responses. Thank you.